watch out for the physics treatments, right?
Have you ever had a gypsy just right up your ass with John Knowles?
There's something is this started to
Welcome to the Psychic Guys. Today, your regular hosts, David, Daz, Brett, and at least one Josh, are joined by special guest Jon Knowles. Jon has been involved with the world of remote viewing since 1999, when he first met Prue Calabrese and got involved with transdimensional systems. He's the author of Remote Viewing from the Ground Up, and more recently, Associative Remote Viewing, the Art and Science of Predicting Outcomes for Sports, Politics, Finances, and the Lottery. This is what we're going to discuss today, so welcome, Jon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here. Looking forward to starting it.
So, our last episode, you rightly pointed out that we didn't cover the successes that remote viewers have had in the lottery, because we were focusing rather on the pitfalls of predicting the future. And you pointed out that there have been some successes. So, should we start the discussion there? And maybe you can teach us how to do it.
Sure, I'll start with a couple of comments. So yes, as we pointed out in our book, there've been at least three major hits, major gains in lottery: $325,000, $101,000 actually, and then $75,000 by three different people or groups, and they each use different methods, and all were pick fives. So they weren't the huge super lottos. And they weren't pick three or pick four. But those are substantial amounts of money, and we can discuss some of the methods if we want to later on. It's in our book, chapter 21, Deborah Katz, in my book on Associative Remote Viewing. In addition, two people have told me that they've had 50 to 100 pick three wins, but they didn't document it. They didn't write it up. I know those people somewhat. I trust what they're saying. Myself, I've had about 35 pick three and pick four wins. I just reviewed that data. Those are the ones I bet. I had some additional hits, 27 in fact, that I didn't bet because they came before I found out the method that works for me. So yes, there have been hits, but they still are very few and far between. It doesn't help us get numbers on license plates exactly, but we look at some of the methods we've used for lottery and so forth, and maybe those will carry over for other people. It does seem to be an individual type situation where one size does not fit all. I have a combination of methods that work for me. Other people, have used different methods, and it's just going to vary with people. Even if you want to put time into the lottery, sorry, my throat's kind of dry. Yeah, so that's a quick introduction to some of the hits that have been achieved in lottery. And then, of course, there's the subject of ARV hits, too. I don't know if we want to get to that, but that's also quite interesting. And some recent developments there are worth talking about at some point.
I think ARV is definitely worth talking about. Let's see if we can have a discussion around what the state of the art is on making money with lottery, sports bets, markets, whatever, because I think lots of people would like to do it, and not nearly so many people have success with it, right?
Yeah, that's when I know Marty, in the APP, the Applied Precognition Project, has been at this for 20 years and has said that if we could make a lot of money using remote viewing, binary associative remote viewing, that would be one way to impress society with the reality of remote viewing. And I actually sort of tended to agree with that, which is why I joined him in 2010 for 6 years and was very active in the group, which has 2,000 members, by the way. And recently, they have had just a quick success using some new methods that Eric Schöne, a German doctor, PhD, has devised, and we could talk about that a bit. But overall, in those 20 years, there have been no millionaires made slowly or quickly. Marty said, let's get rich slowly. It's not happened. It's been, last I saw, around $23,000 had been made by the APPI, the pros who have, get paid from their good results. And the overall statistics until recently had fallen down to around 50.1, 51% or so, taking all the groups together. But of course, if you have huge numbers of groups, you're very likely to get a lot of failing results, or at least you're not going to get the high quality results that someone like Ed May has, using 3 remote viewers that he claims are the best in the world, using his own software, making a lot of money apparently, and that's also been renewed recently. He told me that they renewed doing that and making more money again. Although he's looking for some new viewers, as I think I've mentioned to a few people. And I think he has 1 or 2 he's trying out. I'm not sure where that's at. I haven't seen that for about a year.
Why do you think there is so much variance between viewers, where when you take a whole bunch of, obviously APP, they have training. Marty does a great job of doing that, of bringing people together. I know he does like monthly webinars and stuff like that. And it's not that a lot of the viewers don't know the steps or the strategies. I'm curious what you think, Jon, about why there is so much variance, because I've seen very similar things where some viewers, they actually are exceptional at precognition of getting forecasts at a much higher rate above chance, whereas others, even though they're using the same techniques, seem to land in it's like flipping a coin, over a long period of time, or they'll run into things where they have a really amazing initial success, and then they go right back down to the mean after a few months of doing it. Like they're right back down to a coin flip after about 2 or 3 months of doing it, even though they had a lot of good success, maybe because it was new. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are behind that kind of phenomenon that we see.
Yeah, I think it's important to bring up as you do the decline effect. Pretty much everybody notices that. Angela Thompson-Smith's another person who's tried this many different times with Marty and by herself, and always says she runs into the decline effect. As for Friday, I think, also when we look at just regular remote viewing, there's an incredible variety of techniques there. And as Daz and as all of us can attest, over time, you develop your own variant of what you were taught. I was taught transdimensional, and I've used other techniques and different forms of ideograms. The same with Don Walker, who was one of the members of the public demonstration team in remote viewing. When have we ever heard of that other than Geomagnetic? Excellent viewer. He's also developed his own techniques. He is a chiropractor, but he's dropped out of the field. And then Athena, a third reviewer, also had her own techniques. And Tunde, who's also still around from CR from those days, also has his own techniques. So I think there's an incredible variety among regular remote viewers, and that carries over into binary ARV. However, I think one of the main reasons for the failure to get into 70 and 80%, which is what we've been trying to do all these years, it is because of a combination of the photos that are chosen and how they're chosen, and there hasn't been developed a great pool. But more importantly is this leakage issue of having a very tight protocol. And this is what Eric is doing and what Marty adopted too, and which is also done in the $325,000 lottery win. Very tight protocol, meaning you have a division of labor. You don't talk about things before or after. The viewers are informed very little about what's going on. They'll only, and particularly important, they'll only see the winning photograph. That's all they'll ever see. That's true for all 3 of those people and groups I mentioned. And that just hasn't been done in an APP, and often it's not done anywhere. You look on Discord and Reddit, and you see that people are doing the ARV tournament, and they see both images, but that's just universal pretty much. So it's rare actually to limit it to just seeing one image. And of course, not to get into it right now, but there's also something called unitary ARV. We have only one target. Daz experimented with that. I've experimented with it. Elisa's experimented with it. And that still is an undeveloped area that I think it hasn't been mined as much as many of these other areas. So I think there's a combination of factors that account for this variability of methods and results in all these fields. And probably you have some insight into markets and how it might play in there, because different people have done markets. We had a huge experiment, as people may know, in APP, where we had maybe 15 groups and all kinds of viewers, and we had $60,000 involved, and it failed. We knew going in it was going to be unlikely, because keep it simple, stupid kids, and we didn't keep it simple, but we wanted to try it anyway. Anyway, so I certainly would, if you have insights you want to share on this broadcast, I know you have on other broadcasts about market and variety like that, that would be important too.
Your keep it simple, stupid is so important, I found, with markets. And this is where like, because I do contract work for a number of different just private investors that I've met over the years. And sometimes they want me to do some really, it's like, okay, let's take this really advanced formula and this indicator and let's put this all together. And I'm trying to think, well, I can kind of figure out what that means consciously. But to actually get to the answer, it's like incredibly complex math. It's like, I can't do this consciously. And so we experimented. I've done experiments with that over 3-4 months in a row. And the accuracy was nowhere near what the much more simple, will this be profitable? Won't this be profitable? Will the market go up? Will the market go down? That like super simple type of question had a much higher overall accuracy rate compared to taking these really complex formulaic calculations. And at the end of it, I was like, I wonder, I mean, I don't know. It's an inference. I'm inferring. I wonder if the unconscious, if you can't do it simply in your own mind, like, yeah, maybe the unconscious is better at doing things, but maybe it's also not necessarily the great at doing crazy complicated math as well to give you the answer. So after that experiment, we returned to more keeping it simple. It's just, will this contract be profitable or not? And whenever looking at the task setup, it's always been, how do we reduce the complexity as much as we can? And that has led to more success, at least in the work that I've done, as opposed to the really complex stuff. So it's interesting to hear that from you too, though, Jon, that you've seen some more things about the KISS principle in setups.
Mm-hmm. I just did one more quick note on that. So when I worked with Don and Rolla and we did some of this unitary stuff, they wanted the taskings worded specifically for them. And so I did. I was the project manager. And Don liked long sentences and particular variables in the wording, and Rolla wanted something different. And then a woman in Australia had her own method too. She wasn't a remote viewer, but she had her own wording. So again, variety is the spice of life here, so that I can see, along with tight protocols.
For sure.
So would you guys say the protocol is more important than the specific methodology? Because if we take the lottery, for example, people have loads of different approaches to getting numbers, like doing ideograms or associating with pictures or smells or dowsing or visual reads on it. And is that really the determining factor whether it works or not? Or is it the protocol within which you're doing that that's having the bigger effect? What do you guys think?
I would say it's practice, and that most of us, when we do these as experiments, we'll do it hardcore for a week or two, and then we'll like tail off. Whereas what I find within future forecasting is, when we like predicting the markets and stuff, is that the methodology for me to do that confidently on a monthly basis took probably 18 months to 2 years of doing it every single week to come out. I think people give up way too fast, and they don't put 2 years into learning the technique to do the numbers properly. Anyone, just pick one and then just do it like RV. Just do it for 18 months to 2 years, and don't give up.
I'd echo that from just my own experience. When I started doing ARV back in I started 2016. I think 2017 is when I started doing ARV more seriously, and my results for the first year or two were just terrible. I mean, and the funny thing is the viewing was decent. I just had displacement, nonstop displacement, and where I just would I very clearly hit one of the photos. It just very rarely, beyond chance, was the right photo. And so there's a lot of different ways that I experimented with to try and improve that, but it was just banging my head against the wall for years and years and years until I found something that, it's actually getting better, and to the point where I could use it with other people. So yeah, I think there's probably something to that, Des, where you just have to train, put in your hours, I guess.
Yeah.
Brett, could you just quickly clarify for listeners displacement and ARV and what you're doing? Because a lot of people won't be familiar with the exact techniques here.
Yeah, well, I try to very simply, displacement is the idea behind you're describing the wrong photo. You've displaced to the wrong photo. I'm sure there's other definitions. Jon probably could give a better definition of it than I could. But displacement is usually Just you're describing the wrong photo, and you assume you're being displaced there as opposed to the right photo. Do you have a better description, John, of how you would kind of frame it?
Well, in our book, we talked about several different kinds of displacement where you may be getting information from both targets, or you may get information from the wrong target. And this actually leads to our conclusion in the book that the method which has been established in parapsychology for many years, where you have 4 or 5 targets, and you judge your psi, your PSI, based on selecting one of those 4 targets, that's a fatally flawed method, and yet it's been used by these parapsychologists, academics for decades. And I think Stephen Schwartz has even said that he's not going to do that anymore, and a few other leading people. So yeah, and anytime you have more than one target, you're likely to have some sort of displacement. And that's been the problem with APP's binary ARV and everybody else's binary ARV. So there's different ways to get around it, but that's and you're right, that's basically what it is. You're going to the wrong.
Photo pool has been a big thing that I've put a lot of time into, because a lot of the pools, like you mentioned, John, there hasn't been a lot of effort that's been put into making sure that there's a lot of asymmetry from these binary photos. Where, I mean, I just realized we were talking about ARV and we didn't even explain really what ARV is to the
I think
the
you should
basic
do
layman.
that.
So maybe just a very 30-second overview. It's really not too complicated. You take 2 photographs, you associate some. Here's a simple example. Market is going to go up by the end of the day. You associate the picture of a dog. Obviously, it'd be randomized to some extent. Market's going to close down for the day. You associate the picture of a mountain range, something like that. And then the viewer obviously doesn't know what these associations are. They're tasked with describing the out. There's 2 different ways to do it. One that most people use is what's the photo that they'll be shown later in the day. Because later in the day, the project manager will go, oh, the market went up. Let me show the viewer this photograph. And that's their task. I use a slightly different tasking method personally, which is where instead of requiring someone to show me a photo at the end of the day, I simply ask the question, what's the correct association based on what happens? And it's just a different way of changing how you're doing the wording. And that I've had more success doing that. I also do all my work solo though, so I've had to make sure that I don't have to rely on other people to do taskings kind of stuff. But that's the really simple way of doing it. And then you're just trying to describe the photograph in advance to forecast what will happen in the future. So I don't know. That's my 30-second description. Maybe someone else has a different one. I missed something.
Yeah. What techniques have you been using? Have you just been focusing on lottery, or have you been doing ARV stuff as well?
Oh, me? I thought you said John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done a lot of that app RV tournament. And that's how you'll see the photo later in the day type setup. And I actually just did a 30-day trial, in December. I was trying to hit the top of the chart there, and I got as high as 4th place. I think it was day 15 or 16. And at that point, I just absolutely, I think it was like 73% or something like that. And my rating just started to tank. I got like 8 in a row wrong. Displacement again, like just. So, and I remember talking to you about this, David. I was like, man, what's going on? And you brought up the fact that I wanted it too much. I was focused on the result, on the outcome. I think I've been really spinning on the psychological side of this whole thing. With displacement, actually, it's a fascinating thing to think about. I mean, for example, in that case, I had it built up in my head, like, oh, I'm doing so well. I want to keep this going. And also, when I've tried to do it and there's been money on the line, I found I get more displacement in those cases, which is why I switched to RV tournament for training, because, there's no financial component, it's keep it simple. The more kind of factors I think that you might have loading you down subconsciously, probably contribute to that. Interestingly enough, I was going through, I remember, David, you did a session on the lottery that you guys talked about in the last, or rather a target on why remote viewers have trouble winning the lottery in your last episode. And I in my data for that session, I actually had keep it simple, and it came through as a Kiss song, First Love Gun. But that's what I derived from it in the session. So I saw that right before the episode, so I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, it's I've had better success when there isn't money on the line. With Lotto, I tend to do the dowsing approach, just because I'm a bass player, so I do finger dowsing because I have really good somatic response in my hands. And I did run into the same thing that you guys described in the other episode, where I'll get 2 out of 3 on the pick 3, and that third one will be plus or minus 1, like constantly. It's frustrating, but yeah, I think my blockage there is really, it feels like it's rooted in that subconscious thing where the outcome is important. So for whatever reason, that's kind of throwing me off the trail a little bit. Just introducing noise into the signal, I suppose, or something like that.
I think that's a really important point, or 2 points you made there, is the emotional aspect to accuracy. Like if you've got any emotional stuff going on, just in a normal remote viewing session or trying to do any psychic work, if you're still angry because you had an argument with your spouse, or you're worried about paying bills, or whatever, if that's going around in your head, it's going to impact performance. I think that gets worse. You don't need to come at it with some kind of weird Zen empty state of mind, but you do need to be kind of emotionally level and not constantly being distracted by your feelings. And I think if there's money on the line, especially if it's meaningful money, because I never win more than 10 quid on the lottery. I get 2 numbers right. Doesn't matter what lottery I play, I get 2 numbers right. I might win a 5 or a 10. That's it. It won't perform any better than that.
I got some more to say about motivation and so forth. So when I had my wins in the pick 4, pick 3, and so forth over the period of months and years, when I was in transdimensional systems, one of our mottos there was, you get what you get, and so don't sweat it. And so that's carried over with me ever since. I don't have any anxiety no matter what I'm remote viewing, including lottery. But I wanted to do it and bet on it to make sure that there wasn't a difference between dry runs when I wasn't betting or when I was betting, and to make sure it's real, in other words. So that's one thing. So there's someone called Greg Kay, called it Z-Witch. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, that people, we all know in the industry. He was one who really initiated a 13-year experiment in associative remote viewing and made around $130,000 using his methods. And he's still at it. In fact, he started a new trial called the Time Machine, and I volunteered to be part of it. Well, after I did about 6 of these, I was way up, I was high on the leaderboard already after doing 6. And he said, well, we want people who are willing to do this and not know the results. Viewers who will not get the results till after the whole thing is over. I said, okay. So now I started doing that. And so I'm at sea, I don't know if my motivation or what is involved here, but he sent me a reminder because I'd only do 1 or 2 a week. And that's another thing I think important to mention for folks who may want to get into this. And Ed May has often told Marty and all of us, you guys do too much ARV. And he's had a lot of success just doing a little bit. Like when he has people come out to the West Coast, he'll just have them do 1 a day, and then they go out and have dinner. Whereas in APP, we were doing tons and tons, and the people who are doing remote viewing tournament are doing that too. So I think that's a really important point, just to not overdo it. So I'm going to try to do more for Greg, but I feel like I'm in a space where nothing's happening because I don't know the results. And also, you can't submit pictures; you just submit words. And I'm really used to submitting images that I draw as well as words. And so it's a whole different trip. But Greg's a great guy. He's done a lot for the field, and I figure I'll try it and see what happens. So I don't even get to see the leaderboard anymore. I don't know who's winning or not, but it's a novel way to go about it. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's kind of fun in a way.
If my experience is anything to go off of, not seeing the leaderboard might be a good thing.
Yeah.
I could see that being useful potentially. It probably depends on the person, would be just my guess, but I just in my own work, used to do a lot of sports betting with ARV. And I found when I watched the game, or at least I had the scores up that I kept checking back regularly. First of all, it's just stress. It's just my stress levels to go like, oh dear, But I found that my hit rate actually was better when I wasn't watching the games. And I submitted the work, and whoever was placing the bet, I was like, this is what my work says. Go take it and let me know how I did. And then just send me a text message at the end of the night with hit or miss, and just give me the feedback for that. And when I simplified, again, here's the simplification again, down to that, where it's just, okay, I'm just going to submit it and then let go of it and stop and not be invested. Even though I know there's money on the line, I found that it just worked better overall. So it's like this investment of outcome type of thing. Like, I really need this to be right, when that's a variable in your
attachment to results.
It's attachment to the result. It's almost like
when you watch the game as well, it's like you're wrecking your own work retroactively, isn't it? Because you're injecting all of this emotion and stuff into your session in the past, maybe.
Oh yeah.
I actually had a funny thing. I did a random game like 2 weeks ago for someone, and I set this thing where I'm not going to look at it. And then I figured surely it must be over. They hadn't texted me yet, and so I figured, they probably just forgot or something. So let me just take a look, because it was like 3 hours past the game. It was like a hockey game. I don't know. It felt like a long time. And I looked, and the team that I had, my pick for the team, was winning by 3 points. It was like 4-1 or something like that. And there was like 10 minutes left. And I was like, oh crap, it's not over yet. Well, my team's up, so looking good. 10 minutes, they lose the game, and so it's like,
I knew where that story was going.
Did I feedback myself with the winner?
Yeah.
Like, by doing that, I was like, I should never.
It seems often that we can end up predicting a team that's going to be in the lead for most of the game and then lose as well. I don't know why, even if we don't watch the game. So, I mean, where the hell is the information even coming from? It's a real black box problem.
I wondered if I like feedbacked myself with the wrong winner, which then retroactively affected the work. You know how there's a lot of those. Do time loops exist? Are you getting the feeling? There's a lot of belief around that. We talked about that in the last session. John, I'm actually curious what you think about that. The entire time loop model that we talked about it in our last episode. How do you think precognition works based on? I mean, you've been doing this longer. I mean, certainly way longer than me. So I'm very curious what you think.
Well, I'm writing a book, as you may have heard, which starts with dialectics and ends up with remote viewing. And during the course of this book, I'm finalizing sort of my views on these different topics. One of the topics is consciousness the fundamental? And that's what Marty says, in APP. And coming out of a materialist background, I have a lot of issues with that, even though I think remote viewing is obviously completely a real phenomenon, and psi is too. So then there's books like, I think Eric Warble wrote a book on time loops, and Marty talks a lot about time loops, and also people talk about retrocausation, influencing the past. I don't use any of those models when I remote view myself, and I am not wedded to any particular one, because I'm not a scientist, but I'm really evidence-based, and unless I see, science that really can prove that, I'm sort of agnostic actually on it. So I know a lot of people have firm, definite opinions. There's a lot of talk about quantum mechanics and how that plays in too. And on all these topics, I'm saying I'm more interested in the practical results that we can get and how to get them. And the theory, I'm also studying that, reading tons about that. But nonetheless, Gary Nolan's a great model of this, the scientist who's been looking into UFOs, and he's a Stanford scientist, really top notch, and he's very open-minded, but he also refuses to come down hard on any particular theory or event until he really knows a lot about it. I find him a model in that respect. So it's a disappointing answer in a way, but it's like, let's, show me the results. I'm from Missouri. Let's do the results and theorize, yes, but let's hold that in abeyance till we're really certain about what the heck we're claiming.
Definitely. I think that's I think it's a great answer, because in a lot of this, when we're doing ARV, we're kind of feeling around in the dark. We don't know why, how it's working under the hood. And so we're constantly guessing, which also makes it really challenging, which I'm sure you've been doing it for so long could probably attest to, where you're trying to problem solve. Well, what's the problem? How do we fix this? Is it the photos? Is it the protocol? Is it the viewer? Is it the subconscious struggling? Is it external interference? Is there something that is there some element or variable that is interfering with viewers with intent, and then that potentially causing it? So, but there's no way to prove any of this, because we just don't have the right measurement tools for consciousness.
Have you guys
before we move the conversation on away from here, I just wanted to ask Daz, you've been running an ARV trial with future forecasting, and there's been no feedback. We have no idea what we're doing. We're just sending in sessions and all we get back is money. So, yeah.
Well,
that's good.
I mean, it's an ideal situation as a viewer, but have you so far found the results that have been good, Daz?
Well, it's only the second month, and just as an overview for these guys, though, future forecasting are spending $1,000 a month, paying David and several others to do ARV experiments. It's on a multitude of different things. I'm not going to say what they are, but you can guess what it is.
Yeah, don't give me feedback. Let's not ruin
and
the
real
experiment.
events as well. And it's weird things like working. If you imagine that I'm working with Marty, who's our trader guy. Some of them are like what I would class as obscure bonds and other markets, whether they're going to move up or down and stuff like that. But the approach we're using at the moment is an approach I've been playing around with for a year or so, which is Idiograms. So the guys, all they need to provide me is a single ideogram and their decoding of that ideogram. So it's literally, I think David does his RV sessions for it in like 30 seconds.
Oh, how long does it take to do an ideogram?
Yeah, and for me as an analyst, it's either an ideogram of up or down, or it's an ideogram of land or water. There's not many places to go with it. I'm keeping to the keep it simple approach, the more simple for everyone.
Yeah,
you
did a trial
ideogram?
for the. Oh, it really is just an ideogram.
Well, no, for those who maybe don't know what that is.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Come on,
an ideogram is just like a very basic, almost like automatic writing scribble or doodle that we get in response to thinking about the target for the very first time. And it's literally just a little.
Here's one that's on my desk now.
Yeah,
just a squiggle.
So they give me those. I'm the project manager. I analyze it, and it's either, as I said, it's either a squiggle that looks like it's going up or a squiggle that looks like it's going down. I mean, there's no misinterpretation in that reading. But I have to be honest. Sometimes we get a squiggle that does go up and down, which would be the displacement thing, I guess. Not so much, though. I don't think displacement happens as much when it's this simple, because there are no pretty pictures for people to be attracted to water, because there's a big flowing stream picture there, and the other one's just like a stone on a bench kind of thing.
So when you set these tasks up, the associations with the outcomes are just like an ideogram that you've drawn that says water underneath it or something. So there's no actual target. There's just that high level concept there.
And the tasking that I write on the sheet of paper is something along the lines of the remote viewer will only sketch and describe an ideogram that has an upwards movement, and that outwards movement means that they will be picking target A, and the next one would be blah 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 downwards movement, and that would be target B. Yeah, as simple as that. I do switch it around. So as you know, sometimes I'm asking you to do up or down ideograms, because I tell them, I say I want an up or down ideogram, and sometimes I tell them I want a standard Gestalt ideogram, the Gestalts of land, water, structures, life, and I think natural structures and stuff like that. I think there are 5 of them, so they get to pick one out of the 5, and it seems to be going okay so far. I can't give any results because some of the events haven't happened yet, so we're waiting to see what happens. The initial trial event we did though, just see if it would work with all 5 and see if the first 5 could do well. That was on Bitcoin, trying to predict Bitcoin 2 weeks ahead if it would go up or down. And that one was 100% correct from all the guys on that. And I've done I've run previous projects that show that there is, some very good possibilities of using ideograms in this way.
You had some stellar results on the Idiogram ARV experiment, didn't you? It was crazy
the very first one I
accurate.
did. Yeah. It was, I can't remember the accuracy right now, but it was high up there. I did another one. I did a 50 target one that I still haven't analyzed and looked at properly. But I have to be honest, it was 50 targets. And I know as project manager, I may have sabotaged the project myself in that halfway through doing 50 targets one after another, I was getting incredibly bored with doing it. So
Yeah.
I think I have to be honest. I think the task, whoever's tasking and project managing is just as much a part as anyone else. And I think I did heavily influence that. I think the viewers as well. I have to be honest, getting them to do 50 targets a week for 25 weeks or more, it's just too monotonous and too much. So I think the effect in the latter part of that experiment got worse and worse. I don't know if the real stats on it. I really should do the workup on it, but yeah, as I said, I self-sabotaged, and I can't even look at it now because it's just like it's 50 targets to go through with 12 viewers on each target. So you can imagine the amount of data that needs analyzing on that. Deborah Linkatz worked it with me as well. She did blind analysis on it as well, which was interesting. I did informed analysis. She did blind on it. But yeah, we will try to put it out there at some point.
I have some background info too on this, on a similar method. So the method involves drawing directly market graphs. Okay. So I was at a conference, and I don't forget with Russell Targ or somebody said, let's do that. And so a couple of us, we all do diagrams, and I guess mine was pretty good because this guy came up after me and said, well, you two guys did great. How about I'll pay you to do this? We both said, we don't have a track record. We're just doing this in a class. But since then, John Vivanco and Julia Mossbridge for a time were drawing graphs, direct market graphs, and claiming some success. I don't know if they've continued, but for anyone who wants to look at this kind of method, so there's DASs with the ideograms, and there's also sort of directly drawing the chart and seeing if it matches.
I play with that a little bit. Just
I do quite
ideogramming the chart.
Yeah. Future forecasting do that every week as well now. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I do that actually. I do the technique I'm using is it's funny. I got this from Greg K's work where he does the 3 really quick ARVs in a row. They're very short, very quick impressions. It's mostly a sketch and a couple keywords, and that's about it. So I'm not trying to spend 7 minutes or something in a long session for one ARV. So I do a sequence of 3. And so it's like most of the time they'll all agree, but I'll take if it's a 2 one way, 1 the other way, I go with the majority vote. And then after that, I'll then actually go over to the market chart and then do a very quick ideogram direction. What do I mean, it's definitely kinesthetic, but I'm much more of a visual person where there's like a flash on the screen of where the bars are going to go. And then I'll draw that. And then I take all of that data down and say, okay, well, does it all agree? Is there incoherence between it all? Is it all disagreeing with each other? And when I do have coherence between all those things, that's when I act on that. And it's fine. I literally, the one today I have right in front of me because, I work in the stock market every day. So it's, it's like I'll draw the line and it's like, okay, well, I'm seeing the bars go this direction today. And it definitely works. It doesn't work all the time, but it definitely works. And I think it's a practice thing. Like even you were talking about, Daz, the more you do it, I think the better you can get at seeing where the chart will go. The only challenge with it is sometimes the momentum or the velocity you don't quite see. And so it's like, well, how quick is it going to happen? And so even though the overall,
you should try a template. We started using templates, with indicator lines on there, so you get to see the depth of the the movement of the flow. And
Interesting.
Naeem came up with a really good idea of doing we do Bitcoin now, 30 days in advance every day, so 30 days on a chart. And he did the demonstration and showed us this when we had our London thing. He's got a good accuracy with predicting Bitcoin, and essentially it's just loads of squares, 31 days worth of squares, and you literally just draw an ideogram. Then you're like, day 1 to 31, you're like, you draw little arrows. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Or is it going to go sideways? And it's just literally one by one. It's just like day 1 up, day 2 it fills up, day 3 fills down. Doing that approach, just little arrows instantly. You take about 30 seconds to a minute to do the whole chart. I'm finding doing that on a regular basis as well is starting to show some very good accuracy.
Very cool.
I just use graph paper. Same general idea. It's worked pretty well though for me. Again, I don't do a ton of market stuff or anything, but when I have tried using it, I'll just kind of do. I thought I might have some in this book I have here, but I'll just kind of draw an axis on the one side of the page and then start in the middle and close my eyes and let it rip. But seems to be okay.
Here is the one that I did yesterday. I don't know if you guys can see this. I tried the screen share where this was the beginning of the line. And I saw a dip and then a rocket up, like a massive up. And so this was my quick look. This was my visual. And then notice so it was close, but it's like it still had more to do before that happened. So this is just on the QQQ. But it's just really simple line drawings. That's all.
Yeah. The yellow is what you drew? Yellow line?
The yellow is what I drew. Yeah. So yeah, if I reshare. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So the beginning, so this is where I started. And so none of this was visible on this line. And then it obviously went up first, but it still came down. So I saw it going down and then rocketing up, which obviously, it did. But this is all post-market over here in the blue. And so it was essentially looking for it to come down and then launch back up, except when that happened wasn't precise in that, because I saw this motion in, I don't know, 2 seconds. And then I just drew what I saw, the impression I had. So it's maybe there's a way to get even more accurate, but I do this in combination with my ARV. And if there's cohesion between the ARV and this, typically I feel higher. I have more confidence in that when I use more than one method, essentially. So,
well, I would say just for that particular example, though, it looks like your subconscious gave you kind of the most efficient information that you needed there. So you didn't need to hit every single one of those bars. You got that it's going to go down, and then you pretty much nailed where, and then it's going to go up. So I've always found subconscious information is always really efficient when it comes through. And especially if you're I would imagine, since you're so adept at self-tasking, that you've kind of built those efficiencies up like a muscle almost over time.
Yeah, you do something for 7 or 8 years, in one way. It doesn't mean you eventually, hopefully, you start getting better at it. But I think that's probably, it's true with anything, if you spend a lot of time working with a monitor, for example, that's probably where you're going to be the best. Whereas if you spend a lot of time as a solo viewer, and there's different challenges and hurdles to overcome, and you get better at whatever method you're using. So that's why I think, method almost. The protocol is an interesting one though, John. How I'm curious, could you talk a little bit more about the protocol that the German, it's who you mentioned earlier that Marty is implementing?
Right.
I'd be curious about those details. I'm sure there's other people that would be interested in those details too.
Yeah, let me see if I can call it up here. I've got it somewhere, or maybe just from memory. So I think he wants to share these details to some extent, as far as I know. So they have a team of 3 to 5 viewers. They have a pool of photos, and they remove the photos once they're used. As I say, they don't discuss things before or after at all. So that the viewer just receives tasking, sends it in. They use photos. I think the people who won the 325K, I'm not sure if Eric does the same thing. The photos they use are not cut out because if you cut out photos from a magazine, there'll be something on the reverse side, for one thing. And if you want to use a lot of photos, you can also just use photos online. Of course, you have to have a pool and have someone who manages the pool, and that's pretty much all they do. They're not a viewer. They're not in charge of the task. So there's this division of labor with a strict need-to-know basis, I would say, is on the important facets of it. I wanted to go back at some point to an important topic here, which relates to what you mentioned about Greg K and what you're doing, Daz. And that has to do with, is just one take at your target the best way to go, or do you want to use multiple takes? So we know that Greg K not only did 3 takes, he would do sometimes 30 takes, in other words, 30 brief ARV sessions on a single market prediction, right? And then he would use filters to increase his accuracy from, it was like 55% up to whatever, 60-some percent, something like that. So that's one way to go, using many trials to get the psi sort of in gear. And other ways you can do that, of course, to have majority vote in a group. But that usually turns out that the group manager in APP will use some secret sauce or some intuition to help along there. So that happens too. But with this method you're doing, Dad, it sounds like it's a one trial thing, but you do have a group of people doing it. So I don't know if you take the a majority vote or what you do with that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Have you found that you have to use your own intuition, or you're just going straightly with the statistics, as it were?
Sometimes I countermand what the viewer puts down. So if their ideogram to me looks like, they've written it's down, but I'm looking at it visually and I'm thinking to myself, well, it's clearly more stronger in an upwards movement than it is in a downwards movement. I will mark what they say, but then I will make a note by the side of it that I feel that it may be, slightly different. And then when I, round it all up, I maybe give that credence or not. Yeah.
Not to get too far-fetched, and David, you can straighten me out here, but I just want to mention this important factor too, since we're talking about many aspects of ARVs and so forth. And that is, people like Ed May and other parapsychologists think sometimes that they're the ones that are psychic, right? And that actually has a whole theory about that as to why certain remote random number generator experiments work, because the experimenter chooses when to stop and start the series. So Daz we know Daz is a super psychic, and he's running this experiment. I imagine everybody else here is psychic too. And so the issue is it the experimenter that plays a significant role, or is it the viewers and the protocol, or is it a combination? So that's just another issue for people new to this who might want to think about it, if you ever want to look into it more into it.
I think it is important to have a good working relationship between your viewers and your taskers and PMs and all the people involved in a project, and have everybody friendly and trusting each other and on the same page. Maybe that's one reason why the larger projects fail, is that you haven't got that kind of group.
Let me just mention, if I can add on to that. Let me add on to that, so that Russell Targ, as people may be familiar with or not, who are new to the broadcast, from the Stanford Research Institute, back 30-some years ago, they did silver futures, and they did one viewer, one tasker, and one investor. And they had 9 hits in a row. They won, I guess, around $200,000 or something for the investor, made it into the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. Okay, great. Then they did a second series, and the investor was eager to have more results, so that the viewer had to turn in results before the result had occurred, had to turn in sessions before the result had occurred. And they got much more anxiety. They failed 9 times in a row. There were lawsuits. So, there's other factors here that have to always be considered. And as you said, David, absolutely, there has to be a rapport between the members of the group.
Thank you. That was the word that I was looking for, rapport.
Yeah.
If I think about it in terms of, to give a different perspective, like if I'm going to play music with some random people at an open mic, like it'll probably go okay. But if I'm gonna sit with my band and we're gonna play, like it's gonna be another level above, because we have that rapport, the synergy. I think it makes, and I don't know, I think music is an entirely psychic process, just myself. But it's I see so many correlations between remote viewing and music over the years. But I think you're on.
That's another show.
I know. I won't go too deep there.
Good thing, because I was just going to ask you, Josh, about that, but have to wait later.
Have to wait till next time.
Well, we spent a lot of time on ARV. I think we could probably deep dive some of the lotto stuff, Jon. I know you've had success. You're familiar. We talked about, I think, our personal lotto stuff in the last episode, but kind of what you've done. And I've heard you speak about this before, which I've heard they're really fascinating. If you'd share it with those who are listening to this show, kind of your journey into that and what you've done and how you found success. I'm sure there's people who would love to hear that.
Well, sure thing. So I'd be happy to. I've always had an interest in the lottery, much more than in stock market stuff. When I was in APP, we did stock market, and it's Firefly. It's a major project, and I was an apprentice learning it with Marty and a couple other people, and it wasn't really up my alley. I didn't feel, for whatever reason, whereas the lottery just feels friendly or something. So since I got into remote viewing around 1999, I've done quite a few lottery of pick threes mostly, over the years. And about 2016, I was remote viewing with a couple of other remote viewers alongside each other. And one of them suggested, maybe the results occur in the future, not just on the day that you're remote viewing, but you're betting. Might be 2 or 3 or 4 days in the future. And actually it was not a new idea, but it was new to me. And so I went back and traced, and I, put this in the book, in the chart, of all of the hits I had going back to 2003 or so. And then I compared that with, well, what if I had picked it on the second day, third day, fourth day? I went back and researched that. And wow, there were so many more hits on the days 2, 3, and 4, and it fell off over time. So it seemed like, I said, wow, this certainly seems like something to look into. So that's when I developed what I call the method of advanced picks, where you don't bet just one day. You have to bet for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and it varies, how you feel about it. And so I kept charting that. I started getting a lot of hits. But it was also a combination, and also, by the way, so Geomagnetic and Ingo Swann both have said, well, as Ingo said, when he was trying to do, not lottery, but predicting future numbers, and call it analytics and letters, he said that sometimes a field would form. We sometimes call it a universe, or a field would form of these symbols, and they would line up, and he could call them, and they would appear in sequence. In other words, time was sort of flaky in that situation. And Geomagnetic has said, what if I told you that every time you remote view, you go a little bit into the future and the past, and nobody talks about it? It's in one of his books. So that was sort of confirmation from two of the greats that this time thing is also a factor here. So then there's the question of method. So I've posted way back, 15 years ago, 40 different methods that people had tried or that I thought of. In our book, we have, I think, 15 of those methods. The method that worked for me initially was dreaming, California dreaming, I called it, where I would intentionally try to dream the numbers, and I'd wake up in the morning and futz with them. I found out I'd have to do a little addition, and then I started to get a few pick 3 hits that way. So, okay, that was great. Well, good, wasn't great. But then I just experimented with several other methods, and these are the ones I use. I always use more than one method when I do a lottery. The first method is automatic writing, essentially. And I try to do what I call numerograms. And it's curious because I don't try to draw an exact number. I do a sort of idiogram, but I sort of want to get a first approach to a number. And if I get it, and I do it for all, say, 5 numbers or 4 numbers, depending on the lottery, if the first try works, then I write that down. That's a number. But if it doesn't, I'll try it a second and maybe even a third time with this fake sort of numerogram. So I don't know if that's, applicable for other folks or what's going on there, but nonetheless, that's the first method I use. The second method is I have an imaginary scene I go to. I go down my steps in my house. I'm on the second floor. I go out the back door. I go into the yard, and there's a trampoline there now that my son has for our grandson. Anyway, I go under the trampoline, and I go down into the earth, and I go down some series of steps, and I come out on a beach. I walk across the beach, and I sometimes see a few people there, or I conjure them up that I know from the past. And I go over to a TV set, which is on a table, and I push them on the table, and on the paper that I'm also doing this on paper, so I'll draw a little TV, push it, and mentally I'll push it and see what image comes up on the TV screen. So sometimes an image comes up and sometimes it doesn't. But in any of these two processes, the automatic writing and in the beach scene, sometimes the number will just pop into my head. I call it thought, THOT, and I've advised by David that I should look closely at using that. I'm going to, and so that's the third source of those numbers. So then I tabulate those three methods, and then I make my picks based on them. And when I was having success with return of investment for, sometimes several months, in one whole year, actually, I had a positive return of investment, 38% on the lottery using these methods. So those are essentially the methods I used. And I do think it's important to do more than one method. And also, of course, not to do too much of this, don't get bored. I'm always interested when I do it. I might I've tried to pick 5, by the way, the last year or two, but I haven't made a serious effort at it. And I just do it occasionally. And there's 2 forms of pick 5. Again, if anybody's interested, it's called the quinto or quinto. That's like in Florida where the numbers are from 0 to 9. So the winning number might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or it might be 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. Might have double numbers. But that's still easier than the regular pick 5, which goes from 1 to 35, 1 to 39. And those 3 big wins of 325,000, 75,000, and 101,000, all were the regular pick 5. Another huge, massive attempt, might as well mention it. I think it was James Spottiswoode that did this way back, saying we're going to win the lottery by viewing all the different quadrants that all these possible winning numbers are in. And I think Stephen Schwartz was involved and some other people. So they got the right quadrant, but they had to buy, 1,000 tickets, and they didn't have enough time to buy them, so they didn't win. That was the biggest.
They had the right number, though. It was in their pool. They just couldn't buy them all in time.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just some of the methods and my methods, that I've used.
That's really cool hearing your the TV. I hadn't heard that part before, specifically with the television and going down and on the beach, because that's the times I've seen numbers correctly. It was like that, where I do it a slightly different method, where I'm doing the ERV cool down, where body most close to sleep or on the edge of sleep, mind awake, and then I have a very visual experience. And probably the most profitable one that I had was trying. This was in 2019, looking for the Bitcoin low and a Bitcoin high at the time. This is right before the COVID crash. And I was working with an investor, and he lives in New York. And so where I ended up going, because the prompt was just, it was a very kind of open-ended prompt. I ended up on the street in New York. I saw him on the street corner, and he's like, hey, come over here. And I'm like, okay. So I come over here, and he says, look at my phone. And on the phone was Bitcoin and a number, and the number was 10,400 something as like Bitcoin price. And then I said, oh, well, that's useful. Do you know what day it is? And he said, he switched his phone, and it was February 13th on the phone. I'm like, well, that's even more useful. And it actually 4 months later played out on February 13th to hit 10,000, mid 10,005, and that was the high. The sad part was he thought it was going to keep going, so he waited about 12 more hours before selling. So he sold like 9.9, or right when it started going down. And that was funny. That was the COVID crash, was right after the February 13th. But it was on a screen that someone had showed me in an altered state. So it's interesting hearing your method. So
I think the only time I've ever gotten all three numbers in the pick three was in that kind of hypnagogic, just woke up in the morning, decided to dose it while I was still in bed kind of stage. I probably had some beginner's luck element there too, because it was one of the first times I tried it. But I got a very clear 357, and I did not buy a ticket that day, and sure enough, it was 357.
If you had bought a ticket, though,
I
would
wouldn't
you
have
still
got
get
it.
the
No, it would have
numbers
been
correct?
359.
chicken or
No,
the
but
egg.
the time thing, just to jump back to that for a second, when I was first training in remote viewing, what I did was just a repeated target of what is the top story in my local news tomorrow. And I think this issue of like the subconscious getting bored is huge, I think, and because we keep coming back to that too. But what I figure happened, so the first few days I would get the photo from the top story of my local news, and it was usually some doctor talking about COVID or something, and obviously I guess I got bored of that. And so then I did this for a full month, and I would notice like stuff would come up, but it would maybe be 2 and 3 days until I got feedback. But the stories kept getting more interesting, and it just started to become stories rather than the top story. Like my subconscious would grab the story that was kind of the most personally relevant or interesting to me. So I got all kinds of cool stuff about nature and music and Halloween and things like that. So yeah, I don't know, it's such a personal process. I find like all of remote viewing, like it's so deeply tied to that relationship with your subconscious that if you abuse your subconscious by making it do ARV 50 times in a row on super boring targets, like I mean, you'd get your conscious mind would and does sometimes get bored with stuff like that, right? So
there's a funny that's probably true for most people, but there are those people out there who actually enjoy and thrive off those monotonous things, and you'll find that they can actually do more. I found that I've worked with some people where they actually really like that. They get enjoyment off of that just repetition, and that's not, no, I feel like that's not the norm for viewers. So it's like to say that, oh, go do that and you'll have success is probably not the prescription, but it's like finding what works for you. This is why I'm always such a big advocate for exploration, trying different methods, experimentation, but at the same time, not giving up too early. So you almost have to give each one its due, be honest with yourself, but don't if one doesn't work out, doesn't mean that you just can't do it. So it takes perseverance. And I think probably everyone here knows that. So
speaking of experimentation, let me just share my screen quickly. This is here we go. So here is a sheet that I prepared for some lottery experiments where I'm trying an intuitive, just what number is it? I think it's a 2. That kind of approach, visual, sitting there and trying to see images in kinesthetic, which was dowsing or something, to go through each of the 2-digit numbers that I needed to get and try each approach for each of them, which is like quite a lot of work. But I wanted to see which ones are more effective, if any. I just went and pulled one of these out at random, and it's a funny example of this phenomenon we talked about last week, right? Because look at these. The first number is off by 11. The second one off by 2. Third one off by 2. Fourth one off by 2. Fifth one off by 2. One off by 2. Every single number is off by 2, apart from the first.
That's pretty interesting.
So is this kind of thing which makes me give up doing the lottery,
So what I would do with this, and this is because I've done so much just for my own work, I've done a lot of problem solving. I've tasked other viewers. I put it in my own blind pool, and I use I don't recommend like a novice viewer doing this, but if you know a viewer, especially it's better if they're blind, obviously, and they don't even know about the project, is you could take that session or that piece of paper, set it up as a remote viewing project, and then just ask the viewer to describe the primary cause for the erroneous results. And I've had a lot of success getting some insight by running just a regular remote viewing project from an ARV session. Like, this seems like what really went on here, and just to describe it in a conceptual way.
That's a great idea.
And so it's a way of like self-diagnosing. And is there really feedback for that? No, there's not. So people are gonna, some groups could be like, well, it's not really remote viewing. It's like, well, under some definitions, you could say yes to that, but data out of that has actually been useful in coming up with new experiments, new ways to adjust that has worked. So interestingly, one of them, and I did want to bring this up because I wanted to get, actually, I'd be curious what everyone's opinion is about this. One of those sessions that I ran, it described an external influence on the viewer as the cause of the displacement. And it was really interesting looking at the data because there was a whole lot of the viewers, they were blind, but the viewer was reacting to this injustice that was going on, where some influence was affecting this person, and they had no idea who it was. They had no idea it was being done, and it was causing them to suffer in some regard. Now, suffer, maybe that was just how they perceived the remote viewing going wrong. And so one of the things that I've done recently after seeing that, and I can't prove that, it's all just hypothetical really at this point. But one of the things that I've done is just really set a really firm intention before I do any remote viewing work at this point. And we talked about this before, I suppose, on earlier podcasts, where it's like, I am only open and available to information that's accurate, truthful, and honest in ways that are for my highest good. It's basically just setting this really clear intention that I have no interest in tuning into any sort of nonsense business that might be going in the non-physical space or however remote viewing is working. And whether or not that's, useful or not is probably hard to measure. But I'd be curious what you guys think on external influence, not just this, it's not just a protocol issue. There's actually energy or groups or whatever out there that doesn't want remote viewers to be successful. Maybe even other remote viewing groups not wanting to be successful. I have one more point on that, which, and that'll get, is I'm curious, secondly, Lynn Buchanan did this thing where he put a lot of intention, and I just take his word for this. I don't know for sure, but he said he put a lot of intention on this object that he wanted to make sure no one could remote view. And when everyone,
the story stone,
yes, the story stone, yeah. And every time and this is just according to Lynn, every time someone was remote viewing it, they'd get one of these side things. It was like constantly being diverted from the actual target itself because he had put so much intention on that. And so it makes me wonder, is that kind of stuff floating around in remote viewing psychic space that could influence remote viewers making money, that could influence sessions being accurate, particularly in this regard? I don't know. I'm kind of just spitballing here.
Not necessarily in the financial space, but certainly there are targets which are relevant to the security of nation states and their secrets, shall we say, without naming any names, which do seem to have some kind of protective mechanism. And viewers repeatedly hit these sorts of phenomena when they're working blind. They will all miss the target and maybe get headaches or be fed an alternative target. So I think it can be done deliberately. I've experienced a variety of these sorts of things, and they do seem to be kind of different. Some of it's really bargain basement and some of it's very elegant, right? So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But, are you aware, Brett, of anybody deliberately sabotaging remote viewers' financial perceptions? Do you think, the Illuminati are stopping us winning the lottery so that it doesn't get the secret of remote viewing out?
No, I'm not so sure about that. I've heard.
I think it's a bit more subtle on that, though, isn't it? It's not a physical thing that's interacting. I actually truly believe, especially after doing the project for David, where he asked us to, what is not allowing us to win the lottery. My data indicated that there is a non-physical universal element that's having a say in everything. I wouldn't want to say what that is, but it could be something akin to, I don't know, some kind of force that's looking out for each of us, maybe.
Yeah. Or you could say a force of nature, like part of the workings of the universe. Because if you win 100 million on the lottery, it's going to change so much stuff into the future. It's going to have like this huge ripple effect for your life and probably for everyone in your family, because you'd be giving out millions like it's candy. You'd be making it rain. Unless you hate your family, I guess. But, it would have these big knock-on effects. So maybe if we try and do things that are going to have these big effects, we run into some sort of balancing, counteracting force. And it's just occurred to me that there's like a comparison for this, which is when people have premonitions of disasters or terrible events, that circumstances very often seem to fall such that they're unable to prevent the event, and they knew about it, but they were powerless to intervene. And anecdotally, sometimes law enforcement or whatever is able to intervene, but it's like a trope almost of how I had the vision of the terrible thing happening, but I didn't know when it was going to happen, or I didn't know where. I got just enough information to know that this was a real prediction, but not enough that I could change it. I mean, who knows whether they're the same thing? It just kind of popped into my head. So sorry to sidetrack us a bit there.
But to add to that, I think there's we can't think too linear with this as well, or too simply. I think that there's the viewer, and the viewer can obviously see forward and backward in time. So we know that happens. We've all experienced that. We know that's a fact. So I think the viewer has an influence, and there's data there from the viewer. But I think, anyone that's involved in the tasking, they also have an influence in the project. Anyone that then goes on to view that project, if it becomes public in any way, they have an influence. I think the universe in some way has a say. They have an influence. But I also think that if we're looking at big things like, let's say, the Super Bowl, who's going to win the Super Bowl, I think you can't forget the other 4 billion people who also have an influence because they want one team or another to win, and they're constantly expressing that in their thoughts. And we all know, we're psychics. We know thoughts have a reality. People can move things, change things with their thoughts.
And we can remote view thoughts, right? So maybe every piece of information a remote viewer gets goes through the medium of thought. Right?
So you have all this all happening, all juxtaposition with each other for, trying to get the data. And, you as the viewer are trying to get the perfect signal out of this when, it might not be that simple. There might just be all these affecting forces. And we hadn't even discussed, possible geomagnetic, planetary, sunspot, LST activity that might also...
Somebody mentioned James Spottiswoode.
We should talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we should. I don't know, do we have an up-to-date yay or nay on the LST thing? Because I know that with
I feel like he's back to
additional
nay.
experimenting, you flip-flopped a bit as he got more data, didn't you?
Well, I think there's been 4. I'm not sure of the latest, and I could be wrong, so I apologize if I'm wrong, but it looked apparent. Then he kind of poo-pooed it, and then it came back that a new data set came in, and it looked really prominent again. But now, after even more research into that, it's back to nay again. So it's... I'd have to double check. That's just off the top of my head, so don't quote me on this. That's just my memory. But my memory is potentially faulty there. So the LST stuff I played around with for a bit, and there was a period when I was really focusing on it. This is back in 2022, and I wasn't paying attention to the LST time, but when I went back like 6 months later to look at, I actually had this big dip in my accuracy in February and March. And I was always running the sessions at the exact same time. And it just so happened that LST, local sidereal time, which is for someone who's not familiar with LST, it's a time that's based on, I'm going to butcher this, but it has something to do with the orientation of the planet with the center of, is it the solar system or the galaxy?
I think
you guys remember?
you can actually pick any star But it's like a fixed point in the sky that doesn't change throughout the year.
It's a different way
rather
to
than-
have a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's oriented. One of the theory is that the galactic center somehow is influencing us.
Right.
Yes.
And so
But
when
it has mystery waves.
when the Earth is in a position that's not, and you're on the other side of the Earth,
Yep.
you know, that is the LST. And the last I heard was that Spottiswoode had said it was still a real effect. Ed May had said so too, looking at the same data. But you may be right. Maybe it's been a subsequent. But anyway, so Adrian Ryan's another person who's published on this. A number of people have published on whether there's a relationship between psi, PSI, and geomagnetic factors, including local factors. So there's some literature out there if anybody wants to look into that. And I think most of us don't track it because we get results anyway, pretty much, without times. But it may be the optimum times do exist, and we just haven't researched it enough.
Before we move on with this, I think Josh has to drop off now. So thanks for coming along.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Just before I do roll out on the geomagnetic thing, again, this will be anecdotal, but I have noticed a couple really, really bad sessions that I've had on days where there's been high geomagnetic storm activity from like a solar flare or something like that. I think there really is probably something to this. I mean, if you look at the Schumann resonance, which is 7.8 hertz or something, that's around the same range as like high theta kind of brain waves. And I personally found that kind of brain state works better for remote viewing too. But I feel like there's got to be some kind of connection there with the Mother Earth, man. She's powerful. Anyway, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Take care.
Indeed. Take care,
Bye.
Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an email chain with James, and I asked him again, so that's why I'm just trying to see if I can find it.
I wanted to bring up a related topic here, if I could, which I think is important. If we're ready to go to another topic.
Sure.
Yeah, it's numbers. It's analytics is what Ingo Swann called it when he tried to remote view numbers, letters, and symbols, and he worked at it for 4 or 5 years. And Daz and I, and probably others, have seen a lot of the results that he came up with. He eventually decided that there wasn't enough there to really promote it. He did give regular reports to Ed May at Stanford Research Institute on that. So that's the whole topic of if we could remote view numbers and words and letters, remote view would be a far more powerful tool. And so I did a couple of experiments about 1.5 years ago with that. And the idea too is to look at past numbers, not just future numbers as we do in the lottery. And it's been hardly any work looking at the past numbers and trying to remote view them. The Stanford Research Institute did a number of experiments that Ed May and Sonali Padmawaha wrote up in the Stargate archives, 4 volumes, very thick. And actually there's some experiments in there with alphanumerics, which are more positive than one would think, having been around this field for 20 years and what some of the leading lights have said about it. No doubt, it's different. It's difficult to remote view numbers and letters. But here's a couple of quick anecdotes. So there's a published paper by Chinese researchers who scoured, I guess, the plains and mountains of China, trying to find people who could remote view alphanumerics, well concealed, wrapped up. And they found one teenage girl out of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, I guess, who's in the paper that was published and could remote view like a license plate, basically the same kind of information, amazingly accurately. And not just box, which means any order, but in the exact order, straight order of the alphanumerics. So that's one example that you can do it in. Another thing to mention, I think, is that Yaz and I got a report from a person who went to Russia in 2003, a person who's an upstanding person in the public sphere, although I don't think they didn't give us permission to use the name. Anyway, went to Russia and was taken to an institute that allegedly Putin had set up, where they were training people in PSI, remote viewing, and other measures. And they had a lot of people there. It was very It looked like it was well funded. And he said, let's have a demonstration. And they said, well, let's have a demonstration. We'll set one up for you. He said, no, I've got this magazine under my arm. Can they read this article? It's in it. And according to this person, the young man, I guess, read in English segments of that article that was under his arm. I mean, this is hard to believe. Like when Simeon Hein talks about a guy in Japan who had a cigarette fly across the room and into Simeon's pocket, he's like, oh my God, So in other words, it appears that there are some people who can read alphanumerics, but we don't have a clue as to how they do it. And it's the experiment I did in the fall, a year and a half ago, clearly showed that there was just 1 or 2 times out of 40, like that we could get the name correct of a past president or something like that. Anyway, I thought I'd raise that because that's really a much more important area than all this lottery stuff, but it's much harder to do in it appears of the lottery even.
Well, I've had success doing that in extended remote viewing. I spoke about that briefly in the last show, where I could really clearly see the number. I was, 1 2-digit number at a time. And then after that, I got nothing but noise. And the first 2 numbers were so good. They were so clear and perfect, and they were correct. That was the point that I kind of gave up trying to refine the remote viewing side of approaching the lottery, because it was so obvious that there was something else getting in the way and stopping me from doing that.
Wow.
The thing the story you brought up, John, what it reminded me of is I don't know the veracity of these videos or the research done on it, but I've heard about it and I've seen videos where young kids are taught to read through blindfolds, where they'll have like a cloth over their eyes and a full-on blindfold mask over the top of the blackout cloth. And then they're taught, these are like 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and they'll practice, like it seems like straight, how do you practice something you can't see? And they'll practice reading words with their hand. Actually, they'll take their hand and it's not Braille. It's just a regular book. They'll put their hand on it and then they'll read the words verbatim, line for line for line for line, without actually visually seeing it. And one of the speculation around it is there information coming into through their nervous system, through their hand, like the light, because there's like even our skin has it emits and releases light, and you can actually, there's little boxes. Was it at IRVA? No, it wasn't IRVA. It was a different conference I went to where someone had a box. They're like, put your hand in this box, and it was able to actually measure all of the photons being emitted that was coming off of your hand. And like, is there some way that your brain can begin interpreting what is bouncing off the photons that are coming off your hand as far as text on a page is concerned, that as a kid maybe they can learn? I don't know, but it was a really interesting video. And I know there's been a lot of little schools that have popped up around the world where they teach young kids to read without seeing. And for example, another thing they'll do is they'll have a blindfold on, they'll put their hand around a corner and they'll say, okay, tell me what's around the corner. And they'll actually be able to accurately describe what's around the corner without even seeing. So is it a parlor trick, or is there something more going on here? Make up your own mind, I suppose. But
there are a lot of videos on YouTube of kids doing that.
Yeah.
And it's quite compelling. They're very good child actors. If they're not doing these things, and I've seen them doing like assault courses and reading words for seemingly independent interviewers, and driving go-karts is my favorite one, where they're racing go-karts around a track and they're all racing each other, and you can see them like stopping to avoid crashing into each other, and they're doing I don't know how you could really, because they've got the blindfolds, the really thick ones that you really can't get any light through those. Yeah. They're wearing gloves, I think. I think there's enough stuff I've seen of that to think there's a real phenomenon there. Is it the same as remote viewing, though? Is it the same modality?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not so sure. The way that they speak about that developing is that it can start in like a spot that they can see that's maybe in their peripheral vision, and they'll only be able to see up there, so they'll be holding the book up to one side of their head, and it will kind of grow over time, and it seems to develop in a way that's quite different. There is, I forget the chap's name, but there is a series of videos online from a guy who did one of the courses that you can go on to learn how to do this. He doesn't kind of give away all their proprietary material, but he just talks about his experience of doing it and how he was developing this skill. And it sounds like they were doing a lot of meditation, breath work, energy work, kind of a lot of spirituality adjacent practices as part of developing this. But I don't know any more than that. I think it's interesting, though. It's cool. I'd enjoy giving it a try.
Just today, I saw a video from, I don't know who posted it, but there were a couple of videos of Russian scientists who were claiming that, yes, you have metal plates on the people's eyes that they're testing, and that somehow the information is received by the brain. And they were actually claiming that they could look at brain scans and tell that there was information received there. I'm agnostic on it myself. I just haven't seen enough convince me. And here's stories like Ed May said he went to China and watched people doing this, and he felt sorry for the kids because they're blind and they go look at and why don't they turn around? Why do you have to have, you're holding a book in front of you. Why not just, if you can do that, why not turn your back? But Sean McNamara has also been looking into this, and I think he's even teaching it now, and did it at the APP conference too. So I'm open to it, but I just haven't seen it myself, and I really want to see it myself to believe it, I guess, or watch a lot of videos like you say, David. So.
Totally. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you guys wanted to chat about that you think people listening to this might want to hear about? Or anything you're working on now, John? I know you said something at the beginning that you're working on, a new book.
Yeah, I'm working on a book, but it's going to be a free source book PDF, and probably not appropriate to talk about the contents here, but except to say that it starts with dialectics and ends with remote viewing, and the bridge is consciousness. I'll leave it there.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's not going to be as long as this one, is
No, it's going to be PDF. So.
This book is a good exercise for the mind and the body.
Great paper.
Yeah. If anyone who listens to this doesn't know, definitely go pick. If you want to learn more about ARV, John and Deborah Lynn Katz put together that fantastic book on associative remote viewing. Yeah, it's the master collection, and I'm very thankful, John. You did a great job with that. So that you put that together, I think that was a big service to the field, and people who want to start up now can kind of see what's been done already all in one place to then go from there. I think that's a big service, I think, to everyone who's getting into this now. So yeah,
it's a great book. We spent 16 months on it, and I always say, I worked with Deborah for 16 months and we never had a serious disagreement. It was amazing.
That's cool.
We got reviews from Russell Tarr, and
indeed.
Right.
Yeah. You guys have anything else?
Let's wrap it up then.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Brett and Daz, for coming along too. And we will see everybody in a couple of weeks' time, I believe. So, goodbye.
Ciao.